Meu nome é Cairo Santos e eu sou kicker e único brasileiro jogando na NFL. Cada chute, cada jarda conquistada, cada passo me levou para mais perto dos meus sonhos. Agora, a cada R$ 200 em compras com seu Visa cadastrado, você tem a chance de ficar mais perto do sonho de assistir ao Super Bowl 59. E usando o seu cartão de débito, você ainda concorre a prêmios diários de até R$ 1.000. Não importa o tamanho do seu sonho, dê o primeiro passo. Visa, apoiando seus passos aonde você quiser chegar.
Não é tempo técnico, mas é intervalo aqui no podcast. Já imaginou se seu time tivesse um seguro para não perder nunca? Pois é, isso não existe. Mas com a Zurich Seguros, quem não perde nunca é você. Na Zurich Seguros, os planos se adequam às suas necessidades em qualquer momento da sua vida. Seja seguro de auto, residência, vida e muito mais. Diferente de alguns times, na Zurich Seguros você pode confiar. Para saber mais, acesse zurich.com.br ou consulte seu corretor.
Keeping current with Kansas City. This is Thad Bell, Kansas City Soccer Journal. With me, Daniel Sperry, KC Star. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. Having a good day. That's fair. That's about it.
Okay.
It's been a busy day, but it's been a good day. I'm not in Tulsa, so I'm even better than I was last week.
Awesome. Not that we're totally slamming on Tulsa, but it's good to be home. I had a little road trip in the last few days. Not for happy reasons, but it was still a good road trip. So I'm back, still a little tired. So if I am not my overly enthusiastic self, okay, I'm never really that overly enthusiastic, but we are here. We're talking soccer, and it's good. The Current have won their first home playoff game in history. It's not their first playoff game in history, but their first home playoff game. First one in CPKC Stadium. All the historicness of it. 1-0 win over the North Carolina Courage. 1 goal by Timois, and that was enough. They shut them down.
Yeah,
What stood out for you, man?
the defense. I mean, it just simply is that. And I have been iffy on this Carolina team's ability to break down the Current anyways. In that game, they got a couple of lucky moments. It was a weird in North Carolina. It was a couple of lucky moments. There was a little bit of issues in terms of how do I say it? There were some issues in terms of like how like the game states took it place and the weather delay. There's just a lot that was with that. Um, and so, it's one of those where you kind of chalk it up, but in the two meetings at CPKC Stadium, the Current had won 1-0 and 2-0 against the Courage. And I just think uh, in general, there wasn't a whole lot that where the Courage broke down the Current and were really dangerous. That wasn't like, oh, when it was pouring down rain, the ball slipped out of the goalkeeper's hands a little bit, or when it was pouring down rain, Haley Mace and everything was wet. Haley Mace, tried to trap a ball and it slipped between her legs and ended up going to a player at the back post who had so much water on the ball that she probably shanked and spun the ball way more than she wanted to, and it went wide. I mean, there were just some like odd moments in there that you're like, okay, this is a weird first half, and a lot of it I felt like could have been attributed to the weather. In the second half, obviously it was nicer outside. The sun was out. The game played a little bit different, and the Current just defensively were really stout. We can get into more individual performances down the road, but I just think that was the one thing that stood out to me again was how manageable even so like I think there wasn't a huge disparity in expected goals. Um, However, it was all of the chances that North Carolina had were manageable for Schultz. There was nothing like she made some good saves, but there was no save that Schultz made that I was like, oh my gosh, you're scrambling to get that ball. And when it was her own mistake. It wasn't something that like they allowed North Carolina there was maybe one chance where I felt like North Carolina actually broke them down for a second. and that happened in the first half, and it didn't happen the rest of the game. So it's just like the ability to limit the quality of chances from the back line has been something that's been really impressive over the final stretch of the game season. But in a match like this where teams really have the impetus to create, especially when their season is on the line, for them to still block out essentially the ability for teams to create good chances, which is impressive.
Oh, I mean, the overall defensive effort was very impressive. I mean, we have been effusive in, is that how you say it? Effusive in praise since the new, essentially defensive grouping has come together after the summer window with Almuth, uh, Alana, Kayla. Uh, I mean, how we've mentioned this before about how much we loved Izzy last year and we thought she had, all this stuff. But Ellie Wheeler comes in and essentially takes her spot for a good chunk of this season. Haley Mace, whoever is playing whatever version of D mid, whether it's a double pivot or a single pivot, has been pretty excellent. Um, Vanessa or Lowe or Claire in those roles. It's been Vlaco has basically shut down the rest of the teams in that time.
Yeah,
Vlaco has set up the team to shut them down. He didn't personally do it.
no, but yeah, and like obviously you need the play of players to step up. I really think Ellie Wheeler, she had a good first couple of games of the season, and then you could kind of see the game was moving a little too fast for her, and she was moving a little too fast for the game, and so as she kind of sat for a while until she really started to break back in, it was. All of a sudden, you could see when she came back in, the game had slowed down for her already, for one. I think one of her first tasks out um, after the summer break was that game against Washington, which I know it's a 4-1 loss, but none of it's really, not to me, none of it was really on Ellie, because for the most part, she shut down Trinity Rodman all day, and frustrated Rodman and had Rodman chasing up and down the field. I know Rodman gets a goal. It was a fluky, lucky, deflected goal from a very good player who created found a sliver of a space to get a shot off and get it deflected and loop it freakishly up over 80 France. But we also talk about that game and the amount of expected goals against in that was really lopsided from what the actual score line was. And there were moments where it just became very clear that Wheeler has significantly stepped up her game, and to see Vlaco trust her against Caroline on that side. Haley had been switching kind of, as we talk about this on the pod all the time. Haley was switching onto the team's best attacker as a kind of a de facto shutdown corner would to the
Yep.
top wide receiver. And in this game, Caroline would definitely be the tougher attacking winger. And Vlatko said, "Nah, Ellie's got it." And she had, Caroline came out in the 75th minute because she couldn't keep, she had, Ellie had run her to death down that side with Temwa. And so I think there's just so much promise that we've seen from Ellie and so much growth in recent weeks that it was really impressive to watch. We talk about Vlaco trusting Claire Hutton right out of the gate. And again, we could get to her performance too. Um, but like Ellie at left back was phenomenal. Haley Mace too made like just some unreal reads, some unreal passes in that game. There was one where it was a perfect like switch ball. You had a player that seemingly was isolated with Haley Mace. This is in the second half, and you get this switch from the right hand side of the field, and it's kind of a long ball over the diagonal, over to the top, kind of over Haley Mace's head. And she turns and she runs, and in midair, she jumps, lifts her leg up almost to her freaking head. He gets a touch on it, but the touch was so delicate on it, it just drops the ball out of the air completely. It's one of the most unreal interceptions that will never end up on any match highlight reel or anything like that. But like it's one of those where you've got a player, I think it was like Denise O'Sullivan, that's like on the other end of that ball. Or sorry, at that time it was Courtney Vine, that's on the other end of that ball there. And if she traps that down, she's in 1v1 with an angle to the back post against Alma Schultz. But for Haley to just pick that ball out of the air from at the top of the 18 was in the way that she did. It was the only way she could get to that ball. She did it. She did it to perfection. And it's just like both wingbacks did such an incredible job. And the way that whole back line as a whole has defended individually and collectively has been really, really impressive. And it's what they're going to need going forward through the rest of the playoffs.
Yeah, I do. I remember that play after you were talking about that because I was on the other end. I shot the attacking half on both. I shot attacking end on both halves of that game. Um, and I remember seeing that very clearly at the time. I was like, oh, okay, good. Uh, Another thing that I know I observed this during the game,
Mhm.
and I was just like, wow, Claire is getting wide a lot because I was very kind of far off on the one side. So I just noticed when players are in different spots for at more often than they would be normally. And I noticed that about Claire, and I think it was you that asked in the presser about her being out wide more. I think maybe it was somebody else, but if
It it was kind of wrapped into what it was kind of wrapped into because I'd asked in general just about trusting the rookies in a moment like this, and how did he feel that they performed, and so he went on the rant about Ellie and being able to trust her, and then I wouldn't say a rant, but he went on a spiel about trusting Ellie, and I was like, and Claire, and then he gave that answer
yeah.
essentially because he had effusive praise for both of them.
And uh, what Blanca was saying about his, they had instructed her to be out there when there was a certain trigger. It wasn't all the time. It was only part of the time. She needed to go there when there was certain things happen in the game. And he praised her. This is not a direct quote, but pretty close. Is that she read it so well that they were often like, "Oh, she shouldn't be out." Oh no, she did the exact right thing. They were seeing it. She was seeing it before they were seeing it as coaches, and so that was just kind of really high praise on how she performed in that.
Yeah. Um, and she had a phenomenal game too. There were a couple of plays where she read the again reads the right interception, turns, brings the pass. I thought she was going to score on that shot too in the first half, right
Yeah,
after tempo. If she scores to make that 2-0, that I think that game really is over, and maybe ends up a higher score line at that point because I think for a while North Carolina felt like they could try and play a different game. And then they got to the end where, the Current really didn't have many counterattacks, but they towards the end of the game. But the stretch where it was like North Carolina's trying to enter the final third and the Current are going on counterattacks at every missed opportunity was much smaller than I kind of expected. But if it's a wider scoreline, I think at some point North Carolina really pins their ears back, and just goes at it. But anyways, I just everything that she did throughout that in the game state just incredible. And there's so many times where she was just in the right spot and in the right place. She reads the game so well. Um, and has the calmness, the wherewithal to step on the ball and turn and pivot and move the ball quick enough. I th Again, I was just even thinking of like back to the very first game of the season. We're like, holy crap, you're starting Claire Hutton in this game, Flacco, you're crazy.
yeah.
And you see her out there, and she was making some good things, but sometimes it took her too long to get the pass out to out wide or something like that. And she did so well. Now, it's one touch and move. The ball is on to the next place. And she sees it, she reads it. The game is so much slowed down for her, even since the U20 World Cup, and it's just been really, it's incredible to see an 18-year-old go out there and boss a midfield against Denise O'Sullivan, and quite a few of the Manaka from Manaka was all over the field, and the battle between her and Lowe was so fun to watch. But it didn't matter who was in that spot. Claire Hutton and Lowe were shutting them down, and it was just it's crazy, crazy to think about, but really cool to see.
Did you ever go back and try to figure out what those triggers were that would bring Claire out? Because I have not had a chance to rewatch this game, so it probably will never happen now.
I have not, and I wish I had, but that's okay.
Yeah, I might try over the next couple days, but it's just too much time, or not enough time rather. The game played out much like we thought it would. North Carolina maintained a lot of the possession. I think it was 2/3 of the possession time. Uh, Passing was, definitely in North Carolina's favor. I will say, like, as much praise as we've given the current, I want to say that I feel like their passing in general was not as good this game, but maybe it was just North Carolina giving the right pressure also. I just remember there seemed to be a lot of passes that didn't quite get what they were supposed to do, but there was a lot of, I mean, there was still a lot of good passing in that game. It was just like I don't feel it was as good as what they have been.
Mhm.
Uh, Again, not having rewatched it, maybe I'm wrong. Just looking at the passing percentage, it was kind of low. So like 71% passing percentage for the current versus 84 for North
Mhm.
Carolina. I expected North Carolina's to be good because they wanted Kansas City was quite okay with them having more of the ball and then them countering.
Mhm.
We'll see how that plays out when they go against Orlando, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Just anything else from the game?
Um, I thought Michelle Cooper actually, one other player that stuck out to me, Michelle Cooper to me had a really good game. Um, I think at times she picked the wrong service um, from that spot, but the service that she delivered still was pretty good. But I think there are a couple of times where if she plays the service differently, I think the current score quite a few more goals in that game. So
I know it was mentioned after the game, and we've seen it kind of throughout the year, especially the second half of it, is Timois gets hammered a lot. And, Ellie Wheeler drew a yellow card for having retaliated for the St. George taunting of Timois when she was on the ground.
yeah,
I'm gonna start calling her Ellie the Enforcer.
okay,
I think
there you
that's
go.
appropriate
Yeah.
because she's been willing to hammer people from day one. I'm like that first game, she hammered somebody.
Well, the second game too, she
Yeah.
hammered Sydney LaRue right
Oh
in the
yeah.
box and got a huge one, pissed Sid LaRue off, very much so. Sid was like livid, screaming at the referee about that one. But it's also one of those like Ellie's not afraid to put a body in. So
Yeah. I like that in a player. Not dirty, but definitely willing to throw that in there.
that and maybe just the willingness to embrace the physical side of the game and maybe even see that as like an edge. I don't know. I think of like football players, like you think like a guy like George Kittle, like just laughs when he has to block defensive linemen, and he's just so ready for the battle,
Yeah.
even though that they're like a couple maybe 100 pounds heavier than he is. Um, and you have a player like Ellie who's just like she everything is a 50-50 to her. Same with Michelle, same with Lowe. Oh wow, looks like there's some reasoning behind maybe the players that are out there all together and the kind of the makeup that they have. But it's very clear there's a drive behind everything, and Ellie's got that on the physical side as well.
Yep. I know when we were talking right before we recorded, there was a play that North Carolina thought they scored on that you wanted to shout out.
Yeah, that was a really interesting play. I think there's so many. I was surprised at how long um, the social media bearings and even how reluctant to concede that that wasn't a goal. It felt like social media was as well, and people are like, you got to review that. I got messages from people, and I was like, guys, it's a clip that like, are you going to ask a pro a pool report question? To me, it was very clear and obvious that it's not a goal. You can see it. I could see it from the press box. I immediately thought she kicked it out of her hand. The angle that we had of that was perfect. You could see that the ball is not in the goal. You could see Alma Schultz had her hand on top of the ball. The ball was no longer moving, and at that point, possession is gathered to the goalkeeper.
Right.
It's the goalkeeper's possession there. So the law of the game does not require two hands. It just requires one hand of the goalkeeper on top of the ball. And as a former goalkeeper, I know this too. One hand on top of the ball, and the ball is not moving. You have possession of the ball, and you can't kick it out of the goalkeeper's possession like that. So there you go. I mean, it's plain and simple. It's cut dry. Um, and the amount of hand wringing about it afterwards was ridiculous, in my opinion. I could understand being like, oh, I don't know, but once you see a replay, because I shared a clip of it that your friends over at the Blue Testament. I think Chad Smith had clipped the GIF of it of the replay that and ended up putting it out on social, and or somebody did, whether it was Chad, whether it was Cody, I don't know who it was, but one of them put it out there, and that's what I quote tweeted, and I was like, at this point, you cannot, like, that's a replay that everybody saw on TV. There's
Yeah.
no reason why we should be wringing our hands that this was or wasn't a goal. And could ask Sean Nahas. I don't think he would have thought that that was a goal either. And I think if they had called that a goal, on the flip side, if it was Casey Murphy who had her hand on that ball, I think North Carolina fans would have been outraged if the same thing had happened,
Yeah.
and the goal was counted. So it's one of those where, like, dude, it's not a goal. It's very obvious, and we don't need to waste our time wringing hands about it.
Yeah, I don't blame the North Carolina player for trying, as long as she doesn't, injure a
And it's
keeper
so
in the
bang bang
play.
because for a while that ball is still kind of rolling around there. And
Yeah.
as Manaka, and it really is because it's slowed down, as Manaka commits to lunging for that, it's right as Schultz has finally grasped it. But at that point, Manaka has already mentally registered that the
Yeah.
ball is loose and I got to poke at it and see if I can get this thing in. It's a crazy timing thing, and literally like a half a second later reaction from Schultz to get that is a goal, and we might be talking about a completely different ending to that game. So
Yeah. Not even half a second, man. But yeah,
yeah,
it was tight. And again, I don't blame her for going for it at all.
Mm-mm.
But I guess I think the one of the big surprises was just how many kind of well-known soccer media people were saying the opposite there for a while. So
Sometimes sometimes we all try and see things that aren't there. I'm guilty of it too.
yeah, we are. I mean, it's easy to sometimes see things through certain color glasses. All right, moving on. Any other last thoughts from that game before we move on to our next subject?
Nah, I think we've covered it pretty well. We've talked enough about a 1-0 win. I think there's enough juicy to talk
Right.
about the
Yeah.
next thing coming.
Yeah. Which is again back when it was 5-4 games, 4-2 games. Vlaco said, "I want to grind out 1-0 wins." They learned to do that in the second half of the season, and they ground out a 1-0 win in
Mhm.
exactly what they needed to do to advance.
Yep.
Win and advance. They will next be facing Orlando. Uh, I think we can just go ahead and cover that for a moment here. What's
Yeah.
a top team in the league by points?
Hmm.
They didn't struggle until just at the very end, where the current struggled a little bit in the middle, and it's four playing one, what everybody originally thought would be the final, but is now
Hmm.
a semifinal in Orlando. What can we say? It's two really good teams, two coaches that are both up for awards, two star strikers that are up for awards. Uh, it should be a good game. Sunday, 2 o'clock. Terrible timing for other football fans in Kansas City, but oh well.
Sucks to suck. I Yeah, this is gonna be a really fun one. I'm looking forward to it, obviously. The Orlando will roll out their 4-4-2, and the current will run their 4-3-3. I think it's gonna be really interesting to see in general how it plays out. The current did not have Claire Hutton for that game in Orlando in the midfield. They obviously did not have Bia, but I don't, if I recall, Michelle Cooper had gotten injured. Am I wrong? Michelle Cooper did not play in that game in Orlando. Um, because I'm pretty sure the front line was Temwa Debinha and Nichelle Prince, which they then swapped out and put Ellie Wheeler up on the high right hand side. I might be wrong, but I'm 90% sure.
Uh, I'm double checking that, so just keep talking like we
I'll
would.
I'll keep I'll keep
Uh,
moving. But I think there was a lot of, that was a 0-0 game. You, you know, in the first game, you have the fluky penalty kick goal with AD French, but you also have um, each a great individual effort from Temwa and a great play from Banda in the very similar fashion that she has ever to the many goals that she scored this season. And so I think there's to me, I think with this Orlando team there's just a lot of intrigue. into, how do the Current can the Current defend them in this way again? Um, I think too, like the most recent games for Orlando, a 3-2 win over Seattle and a 4-1 win over Chicago. I mean, you all fully expect them to beat those teams, right?
Right.
Um, their last two games against playoff teams, a 2-0 loss to Portland and a 3-1 loss to Gotham. Um, so I don't mean this to say that, oh, the Current have this in the bag, but I just think that, this is one where the Current um, were able to um, the Current were able in that game to shut down a very star-studded attack, and in a game where they didn't really have their best possible attacking setup that they could have put together.
Yeah.
And I think I just think that, like, looking at that, um, for what it was, I'm really curious to see how it all how it ends up shaking out, because this will be a different Current attack. It'll look different in the midfield, and even the back line, I think, will look a little bit different. Elizabeth Ball started at right back in that match.
Yeah.
Um, you know, uh, there's just a lot of different things that I think Vlatko can do in this, and I am fully looking forward to to what's going to come. But I did think, in that game. So I'm looking back at it now that I have the lineup pulled up. Cooper came on as a sub in the 60th minute along with Bia at that point, and I think the Current very clearly after that in the second half. Um, they had a stretch there where they looked pretty dangerous for a while, after those substitutions, until Orlando made a couple of subs and kind of took the control, at least the control back through the final stretch of that game. So I just am really intrigued to see what this lineup looks like for the Current, and whether or not that the chances that they get, they can take advantage of it, because they're gonna get one or two, maybe three really good chances. And if they can put them all away, that makes this a really good opportunity for the Current to win. But I think the Current, if they're going to win this game, they're going to have to score twice. That's my big prediction for this one. That if they win, they score two goals.
Yeah, that's I would actually concur that that's a most likely outcome, is that they would need to get the two. And yeah, when you were saying earlier, it was they were missing Michelle from starting. They were missing Claire. Lots of people not starting that would normally start, and they still took Orlando to a good result there. So they can go down there. They can get the result. It should be a really good game. Uh, One thing we did mention earlier is Bia is out for the rest of the year. They did move her to a season-ending injury the late last week. Didn't really announce it, just slipped it into the notes. But so she moved into. I kind of was asking about it and was kind of told that at best if they pushed her, she could have played 10 minutes in the final, and instead of risking her and making a worse injury or a longer term injury, they just put her on season-ending injury and ruled it out. Timois
Yeah.
is going to be again day by day for this game.
Hmm.
Was not practicing today when we
Correct.
were there
Mhm.
on Tuesday. And so hopefully she is able to play. I'm sure she'll be able to go and at least be available off the bench. I would
Yeah.
be surprised if she's not, because this is the time of year when you go, screw it. You go for it a lot.
Hmm.
I wouldn't be shocked though if she does not start. So
Yeah, just the vibe. I think the vibe from Vlaco is a little bit different this week, today when we talked to him. Of course, it'll be interesting to get the vibe from him in Orlando. Um, so, uh, I think one thing he talked about was that the swelling in the inner knee, something began to swell up, and I think they're just trying to manage that.
yeah,
Um, so as long as they can reduce swelling and make sure it doesn't get worse or anything like that, then hey, I wouldn't be surprised if she's available for at least 30, if not 45,
yeah,
off the bench, in the worst case scenario.
yeah. I asked Vlaco today what started that. Was it some injury in the game? Was it a tackle? Was it just from practice? What? And he said it started in warm ups at the game in San Antonio. and that's why they took her out at halftime because she was feeling some discomfort. So trying to manage that at that point. All right. Think we only have a little bit of time left. Can we squeeze in a little bit of
Oh, we can.
all right. We can. We got to make it fast.
Can.
The awards are out, or the award finalists are out. Most Valuable Player, Barbara Banda, Tim Wajawinga, Martha, Trinity Rodman, Sophia Smith. Who you voting for?
Temwa. I think it's just pretty clear.
That's
I don't really need to say much more. It's
Yeah.
painfully obvious.
Yeah. If anybody doesn't, they are doing it for the wrong reasons. I would be voting for Tim Watt if I had a vote. Defender of the Year, Naomi Gurma, Kaylee Kurtz, Tara. That's a name that always throws me. McEwen,
McCown.
ugh, Emily Sams, Kylie Strom. Who are you voting for?
I was gonna vote for Sam's. To me, it's between one of Sam's or Strom.
It's always sucks when you have two players from the same team in the same category, and we'll see that again here shortly. Goalkeeper of the Year and Berger, Hot, Morehouse.
I have been leaning Morehouse. I probably will end up going that way. I did want to. I haven't double checked these stats in a while. But I one thing that I thought was interesting. This is just I'll do this as quick as I can because I know we're up against time. Alma Schult. In the great post-shot expected goals plus minus category, Alma Schult is in the top 6 of goalkeepers for cumulative, and she only played 9 games in the positive stretch, and her positive rate per 90 minutes is the highest in the league. If I am, I would not be shocked that if the current had Alma Schult the whole season, or that she would have been in there in the conversation. But I understand playing time is not it. But Morehouse for me has been the one that I've just been really impressed with all season long, and Berger maybe has a little bit higher numbers, but for me, Morehouse has just gotten the job done. Been really, really impressive.
Yeah, I would probably lean towards Morehouse myself, but I would have to double check some stats. Midfielder of the Year, Croy Bethune, Vanessa DiBernardo, Lola Banta, Marta, Ashley Sanchez. Splitting the vote there, DiBernardo, Labonta, Bethune. Who you go for?
It's just singular, right? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Personally, I would probably go with Low. But I could hear some of the arguments for other players. To me, okay, because to me, obviously, we'll talk about the next category. Rookies are in there. We'll get there, but if Croy's going to win Rookie of the Year, I think the midfield probably needs to go to somebody else.
Rookie of the Year, Croy Bethune, Claire Hutton, Ali Sentner. I think it's to me the only conversation is Bethune or Hutton, but I might be having the color glasses. I would vote for Claire, but I absolutely understand why everybody would vote for Croy.
Yeah, I probably will lean Croy in this one. I do want to just give a shout out to Sentnor, who had a fantastic
Yeah.
season, and goodness gracious, was one of the redeeming qualities of the Utah Royals squad this year.
All right, Coach of the Year.
To me, it's got to be Seb. But I also, because I actually voted, who did I vote for last year? It wasn't Seb, but to me, I think Seb's got to get it. This just, that team is historic, in terms of the record that they had, the points, the way that they won the Shield, how good they are. To me, it's Seb. In any other year, I think Flacco ends up getting it, but to me, it's Seb.
I think it's those two or should be the finalists. But all right, man, I think we're out of time, so we are technically out.